Hello everyone, welcome to the Eternal Spoiler Breakdown. My name is Pojo, and I have been lax in my duties for the last couple of days. We have a lot of spoilers to get through, so we're going to get jumping right into it. This probably will be like a two-parter for YouTube, so I think we'll split this up in some way. But yeah, basically there are a bunch of new cards that have been spoiled. There is a Heroes event going on right now that should be probably over by the time this video comes out, but pretty close to done. The set release date is Wednesday, so it will be out on Wednesday. We will be playing most of the day, trying to actually get everything done. I believe we'll start like right after work, and hopefully things will be going pretty well. So probably around 6 p.m. PST, we will be playing tons and tons of Eternal, and we might even be able to get off a little bit earlier than that, depending on what's going on and how we're feeling. So yeah, so first things first, let's go over all of the new cards. There's a bunch of new stuff to discuss. One of the things is that there is a new power type, which is a new power card, which is a common depleted power that provides 2 influence of a type. This is not surprising. Mentioned this might be a possibility as time went on, so like this is something that does seem like pretty obvious with the way that current influence is organized towards heroes, and with the way that you want something to actually have good synergy with Surge cards. So they're not terribly powerful cards in their own respect, but they are relatively good. We'll go over them as we run into them in depth, but I think that that's going to be an interesting addition to the set that should really sort of fill out with this whole Surge setup. I'm really hyped for this set so far. It looks like the whole setup that they're going for is going to be a little bit more down to earth, a little bit more back to basics. Included in that back to basics list is new tutorial scions. So if you are playing the tutorial after this set comes out on Wednesday, you'll get access to new 7-cost scions. The old scions, the 8-cost scions, are going into a decraftable state so that you can basically sell them off for Shiftstone if you are so inclined. But we are going to be talking about each of the new scions. There are 7 cost. They have new fancy art. They seem to be redesigned to have like better art in general and just be like better designed, like sort of for more interesting like tutorial setups. And they're going to be going in the Eternal tutorial and being rewards for that for new players, which means better new player experience. Always in favor of that. So you can earn copies of them in the tutorials, and then also, of course, claim them in the packs themselves from this current set. So let's talk about those scions first. First off, we have Caleb Claimless, 7-cost quick draw for 3 fire. Your other fire units have +1/+1. When Caleb attacks, draw a weapon of your choice from your deck. Weapon tutoring is reasonably strong. The main problem with this card is that it doesn't really have charge or any sort of onboard impact. The immediate bonus to your other red units is quite nice, but I think that quick draw might not actually sell Caleb as a particularly strong option for the early game. A 7-cost 6/6 with quick draw is certainly not unreasonable. It trades okay, but I think that like if you aren't getting this card to attack with some form of charge, it's going to be a little bit difficult to get a lot of benefit out of it, especially since the weapon that you're drawing still has to actually be played and used. And if it is a relic weapon, that's fine, but if it's a weapon that needs to be played on a unit, then that triggers after Caleb attacks, which means that not as great of a synergy. Nonetheless, it's kind of a decent setup for big fire value, so should be fine as a tutorial card and something to get your decks rolling if you are low on cards to play around with. Talir Timeless. When Talir attacks, play the top card of your deck for free. Your time units have +1/+1, and it has Overwhelm. I like this one quite a bit better than Caleb. I think that, yeah, there's some really cool art going on with this card as well. This looks like a little bit more of an evil Talir than usual, but that is generally pretty common. I think that, like, Argent Depths is sort of going back in time a little bit and reviewing, like, sort of more evil versions of the general characters, but also like this is like I think it might just be like a makeup thing. Like overall this character seems like yeah, a pretty good design of Talir. I like going back to the red hair and that general setup. Like the sort of Super Saiyan Talir design never really kind of worked for me. I'm sure we'll come back to that at some point, but at this point this seems like a really good sort of good Talir card in general, and one that should sort of symbolize Talir in some pretty good ways. Playing the top card of your deck for free is awesome. It's a really cool ability. We saw it on Birthright and on the Golem Great Kiln Titan, and we have seen a couple of other cards that can play around with this idea as well. This is something that really benefits Praxis decks in particular, and I think it's something that Talir is happy to have, especially since it synergizes so well with the Praxis Arcanum. This is a super cool scion. I'm sure that it will be pretty delightful stuff. Yeah, somebody's saying, are these going to be avatars? I'm sure that they will. Like, I don't even think they'll be earnable. I think that they will just be available. The new art for each of these is just like really, really solid. Vara, 6/6, 7 cost. Other units, shadow units have +1/+1, and lifesteal. Also not a bad thing to have on a big 6/6 unit. When it attacks, play a unit from your void. Once again, free cards are always good. This also gives you better selection than Caleb's card or Talir's card, and overall seems like it's going to be pretty strong. I actually think I really wish that Caleb played the weapon out of your deck. I imagine there are some ways that that might be like way too strong, but yeah, the ability to affect the board on attack like this with cards like Vara and Talir is a lot better, I think, than what Caleb is doing with the tutoring on setup. I think this is just like a much stronger setup, and also lifesteal just really benefits the large unit a lot better. It's a really, really good way to stabilize, and the playing a unit from your void is very nice, especially if you can give the card charge, which certainly possible, again, with Praxis Arcanum. Good, like, Xenon setup, easy way to get some good stuff out of that. I think that Praxis Arcanum is actually going to be a really good card for setting up with all of these new Scions, so if you want to do dual color setups, that's a pretty good way to give something charge, and also just sort of enhance the value of a site that you might be underplaying at the moment. Seems really cool. Rolant, Endurance. Other green units have +1/+1. Where Rolant attacks, play 2/3/2 soldiers, which are of course 4/3s because Rolant is Merciless. Endurance is a reasonable stat line to have on a unit. It's a nice little sort of old school Rolant. Interesting to see a redo of the card. Certainly not like a time shift or anything, like Rolant is not alive again. This is just like a new version of Rolant from the past. And yeah, doesn't seem too bad. I think that like playing a bunch of stats is kind of boring, but it's not an unreasonable card. It might even be one of the stronger of the batch, especially since it's one of the most reliable. Gives you a ton of good units, and then the units have like extra stats overall, so seems reasonable. Endurance also means that the card is a little bit harder to kill or permafrost or deal with in a lot of those ways. Being a 6/6 is not as good as being a 7/7, and notably doesn't like... It's an okay 6/6, but it is like... Yeah, it doesn't trade that well with a lot of the big stuff on the board, so its blocking defense with Endurance is not that great. I'm not sure about this one. I think that the stat line on it is quite nice, but that green is also doing a lot with overall like piles of stats in general. This is probably something where Ikaria just takes that slot still, but you might see like some other green decks that really want to play with this and could even do some decent stuff with it. Ellyn, Fearless, 6/6 Flyer. Flyer is probably the strongest stat line to have on a 6/6 out of the batch that we have seen. Lifesteal is very good as well, but like compared to Overwhelm and Quick Draw and Endurance, Flying is definitely quite a great option to have, since it gives you a very good blocker in the air. It also gives you a lot of reach, and with all of your other primal units having +1/+1, that's a pretty strong way to get things started. When Ellyn attacks, you draw 2 cards, which is certainly a reasonable option and allows the card to replace itself if it gets charged very easily. So even if you spend like an accelerate on it, it's going to redraw enough cards to justify the accelerate. So really good card to be giving some sort of form of charge with, and Scions having charge is a pretty good deal, I would say, overall. This seems like a really solid card. I think it's probably up there in the top 2. If I had to rank these, I would say that like Talir and Vara are probably at the top, and then Ellyn is contesting for that slot, but maybe in the middle. Rolant and Caleb are in the bottom section overall, but yeah, between these 5, like, this is a really satisfying one, and also great piece of art. All of the Scion art here is just really, really good. I think they did like a wonderful bang-up job of selling these characters again, and like I'm very excited to be returning to these characters as time goes on. We've talked about a lot of the hybrid color heroes, but I believe there were a bunch that were revealed in the event that we haven't talked about yet, so let's go ahead and go over them now. Angelica, Praxis, Infuser. Pay 1 and exhaust to give Angelica, exhaust Angelica to give one of your other units strength health this turn equal to the highest cost among spells and weapons in your void. This is notable for the body it's got, since it's a 3/8. I think that that's like a really ridiculous option. Yes, Ellyn is sitting on a serpent in that art. So yeah, this is kind of a decent one overall for the stat line, but the exhaustibility is not that strong overall. It does allow you to basically pay 5 to give a very large buff to a unit that is currently in play, provided you have a lot of spells out. So Angelica can potentially come out on the turn that she is played and immediately infuse like a Grenadin with like a +5/+5 and give you a big sort of beatery effect. There's no shortage of big beatery effects in Praxis though, and the fact that you are losing the blocker and losing the stat stats on this card every time that you're exhausting potentially reduces its value in some ways. It's got a very like sort of Aegon feel to me, even though the stat line is much, much better, and the card still has a great defensive line, which makes it very hard to kill for a variety of reasons. Still, this is not your favorite card to get suffocated. I think that it's okay, but I would think that it's sort of in the bottom rank of the 10 that we have seen. Buhton, or Buhton, Death's Reach. We're going to call him Buhton. He's always going to be called Buhton. When this card was revealed, there were 3 different spellings of it. It was spelled Buhton, as well as like Buhton and Buhton, I think. In any case, I refuse to call him anything but Buhton, because Buhton is definitely this gunslinger's name. Charge Imbue, so 5/2 charge for 4, not a bad stat line. When you imbue, kill an enemy unit with less strength than the stunned unit. Notably, doesn't really feel that good in gunslingers. We actually played a little bit of gunslingers with it, and like because most gunslingers actually have relatively low stats, this card doesn't kill things as often as you would like. It's actually kind of something where you might want to be playing with some more aggressive, like really high value cards, like maybe Oni, where you can get the really big buffs from like Kazuo and stuff like that, and get like a really high attack unit so that you can get the kill off on Buhton, because that is the thing that you really, really need for Buhton to do the thing that you most want it to do. I think that if it doesn't kill an enemy unit, it's okay, and it certainly provides you with some reach, but you really kind of need that kill effect combined with the value of the card's overall damage to get where you want to go. And since the card does not have any like potential reach beyond just being a charge unit, you really need to be able to keep the board low and then still clear the board afterwards, which means cards with removal, cards with a decent amount of like removal attached to each other. You can do some decent stuff with it. There's certainly some potential value, and yeah, that's Buhton. Haven't really enjoyed playing with him that much over the other alternatives, which are, of course, Bandit Queen and Vicious Highwayman, but this is a card that does promise to replace those cards in particular decks. I think, honestly, not in Gunslingers, but more in, like, Sentinels or something where you're playing with, like, more aggressive mid-range units. Danica Ruined Witch, Imbue. When you imbue a unit, draw a card. I don't know if we've talked about Imbue yet, actually. I've realized I just reviewed Buhton, but I don't believe that we've actually talked about Imbue. So Imbue is the new mentor, basically. You exhaust a unit when you imbue, and then you get that unit's health and attack, or strength and health. So it is stunned for the duration. That means that, like, basically you have just sort of absorbed that unit and stunned it and put it onto whatever this unit is. And then when you imbue, of course, you get a big stat bonus combined with your card draw, which, yeah, can be kind of handy, but similar to Mentor, provides you with some clear weaknesses as well. Danica Ruined Witch draws a card immediately whenever you imbue, meaning that if you are imbuing Danica, you do immediately draw a new card, and you get a very large statted unit that can do offense and defense, and what you're really trying to trade with, because then you get your imbued unit back because it unstuns afterwards. I think that there is some pretty interesting value in that, and that's got some good potential to it. Overall, seems like a fairly solid card if you're playing with imbue, because it gives you a lot of benefits to playing with imbue, and like notably, like this is a card that really synergizes well with a lot of very obvious Elysian targets, some of which we haven't seen in a while. Good examples include Lurking Raptors, makes Danica Ruined Witch a 9/10 on turn 4, or False Prince makes Danica Ruined Witch an 8/9. Yeah, there's some pretty good benefits there, and obviously like getting that imbue benefit is really, really strong if you can get it down early. So yeah, plenty of good options there, and Danica is definitely something that you can throw out and get some really good benefits off of, provided you can pay the costs for it. Seems like a good Elysian mid-range beater, and if we are returning to a more like set one feel, this actually could have some potential for Elysian mid-range to be a thing again. Haven't seen that deck in a very long time, would be very excited to see it again. Katra the First Seal, just spent a couple of games getting wrecked by this card, or at least one. Spells can't leave the enemy void, so already a decent benefit, because it's already got a lot of very good text on it. Surge +1/+1 and you gain a health. Already pretty solid. If you play this card and you play a Xenon Banner, then you get, you know, a decent amount of health immediately. Summon, play a power card from your void depleted for each of your units. So if you're doing any form of self-mill, you can pick out Katra and then play it and get a bunch of benefits from it immediately. I think this is actually a really strong card, combined with the Xenon Vow. It's very easy to get some power available to actually play depleted, and when you play it depleted, you not only get ramp out of the card, but you also get permanent ramp, which is unaffected by other setups. That's something that most other 4-drops can't do for you, and you get life gain, which helps you out with other sorts of forms of power boosting, such as, for example, Mask of Torment. Yeah, fairly strong option. You can get this card to very ridiculous proportions very quickly. It behaves really well in recursion, and like overall seems like it's going to be something that should give you a decent amount of value right away and give you some good benefits, provided you can get some stuff into the void. All you have to do for this deck to work is self-mill yourself a decent amount, which there are certainly cultist decks that do that already. Take a look at the oh, it's not Iron. There's a 2-drop that discards Cultist from the top of your deck. That's a good place to start for Katra the First Seal. Clearly some good stuff here if you want to be playing around with basically digging into your own void. Kenna Uncontained, 4/5 flying killer, ultimate when you have hit the enemy player with units 5 times, draw a spell from your void. In the event, this deck is being played almost specifically with Throne Room, which makes a lot of sense. The card is clearly designed to work very well with Throne Room, and also it's a 4/5 killer for 4, which is a really reasonable stat line. This card seems ridiculous and overpowered and quite solid. I don't think that there's any like particular weaknesses to it, so yeah, I mean, it's just a really overstated Skycrag Dragon, which, hey, that's kind of nice. I don't really love seeing more overpowered Skycrag Dragons because like we already have like a 6/7 in that setup, but it's also nice for blue to get some good like healthy units to be playing around with, because blue frequently does not have like great options in terms of like high primal options. This is clearly a strong card. It's probably top of the pack in terms of the 10 that we've seen, and like basically out of all of the heroes, I think this one has the biggest potential to see a nerf very early, as well as the biggest potential to like definitely spiral some early decks. It's currently, I think, doing very well in the events. I don't really know for sure, but I've certainly seen a lot of it. And finally, Marley Heroic Marshal, I think, is the only other one we haven't reviewed. 4/4, Surge +2/+1 and Overwhelm, and summon you may silence an enemy unit or kill an enemy relic. So similar to the other Sheriff Marley, it provides you with a silence on turn, and it also gives you the enemy relic kill, which is super good as well. This is pretty good. I think that like combined with that Surge and Overwhelm ability, this card just basically provides you with everything. It's a giant ball of stats that also gives you attachment destruction. Similar to Sabertooth Pride Leader, this is somewhere where you can actually get a ton of value out of it in a very short period of time. Unlike Sabertooth Pride Leader, this card can't be played fast, which I think is one of Sabertooth Pride Leader's bigger sort of benefits, so I wouldn't actually rate it as strong as that card in terms of its overall versatility. But in raw stats, this is a threat that must be answered that also kills an enemy relic, so Rakana's going to love to play it, and seems like a reasonable choice in Ikaria decks, provided you can get to that very expensive fire influence, which is not always easy, considering that Ikaria decks often want to play towards Ikaria Guard Captain Ikaria, the second Ikaria. So like it's a little harder to lean towards green when you're trying to lean this hard into red, which means you have to go a little bit more aggressive with it. Might change the makeup of that deck a little bit. I think it's a very strong card overall and a very strong gunslinger in general, so certainly something to be potentially playing with in future sets. All right. That is all of the heroes. Next, we're going to go over some draft cards and stuff. This will probably be where we hit a short break. So to the YouTube folks, see you in the next one. And to the Twitch folks, let's get cracking.